I'm in here sweating like crazy because I'm out of shape. And I finally started working out. Danny's been making fat jokes for like the past 3 months. And it's finally started to hurt my feelings. So here I am sweating during this podcast because of you, Danny. Thank you.
Hey man, I've been trying to bring peer pressure back for a number of years now. So
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
just
waiting
glad
for you to get canceled. If you guys are interested in canceling Danny, we'll get a petition going. It's a little abusive around here. Yeah, what up, man? How we doing?
Fantastic.
Bro,
Yeah,
we've been
doing good.
yeah,
Excited
me
for today's
too.
talk.
We've
Yeah.
been like off camera just going through it, just talking through anything and everything from injury to performance to health, and even just trying to nail down a topic has been difficult because it's once you start focusing on one thing, you start to realize all the component parts that lead to that one thing, and it's like, where do you start? Where do you focus? So I know we talked about this being an important podcast, but I think the next 5 are actually really important. Like we're going to talk through a bunch of stuff today, which is going to lead to a whole other conversation and a whole other set of guests, and then we'll take it the whole other direction. But they're all connected, so it's one of those things. It's like if you're listening now, you're going to want to hop in the next 4 or 5 at least.
I mean, I think like it was funny, man. Last week, I think like we kind of came to a common point where it started to kind of unpack itself of all these different things that both of us have been, kind of working towards and trying to pursue for a number of years now, where, for you for a long time, it was like, I'm the speed guy, I'm the 40 guy, I'm the combine guy. And then, I was doing the stuff with the fascia stuff. Like, I think we both kind of saw those as vehicles early on that led us to this point. And then now we're sitting here like, okay, like, yeah, speed is obviously important. I obviously stand by all the fascia stuff, but you peel those back a little bit and it's like, okay, well, what's kind of the real root of the problem? Well, the real root of the problem that we're both noticing is that organizations and teams and athletes across all levels, males, females, youth, professionals, are having a really difficult time staying healthy and staying available. And I think both of us have a genuine curiosity to really figure that out. And why are we in the state?
No, it's interesting because at the same time, performance metrics are through the roof. Guys are getting faster. Guys are getting stronger. I went to a high school game and watched Honor play on Friday. Not only did the dude hit 22.8 miles per hour in game, he had like 400 yards. Their linemen were like 300 pounds. That all probably ran sub 5 seconds. It was insane. I'm like, the performance side of things is obviously improving. I mean, there's a strength coach on the field that had an iPad that was connected to GPS. They had a TV on the sideline.
Oh, wow.
And they were going through, the tactical side of things. They had somebody in the booth. Like, they had a drone overhead. I mean, it was insane. Like, the technology is getting so advanced and the players are getting so far down the performance rabbit hole. But are we seeing more injuries?
That's wild. I didn't know they had all that going on. I mean, yeah, well, you're taking me back to some Texas time here too, and shout out to Soto, man. Some of the kids down there and some of the schools and what they were doing down there and the facilities and the resources, like the way you describe that is, it's the professionalization of high school football almost, and we know these kids are starting up in January and it's, full go right away. It's really, really cool to see. And it's absolutely fascinating. I think what you were alluding to there at the end, this is the other side to that coin is that we have definitively and conclusively seen, we'll say conservatively, a rise in injury rates or incidents across most sports, particularly, from the youth levels since 2000. And the numbers are clear on this. I got kind of villainized after one of my podcasts last year. I think it was the Coach Me Up podcast. And I got a little hot down there, but I was talking tongue in cheek and said, injury rates, soft tissue injury rates are skyrocketing right now. And IG Warriors just went to town on it. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna really do some research on this. So since that point, I've been looking into this pretty deeply, and it's true. It is factually true that the injury rates since 2000, soft tissue non-contact particularly, have increased. And at the youth levels, we've seen this in person quite a bit. It's not just the soft tissue injuries, it's a lot of stress fractures, and it's a lot of bone injuries and growth plate injuries. The obvious elephant in this conversation is, okay, well, let's talk about early sports specialization. And I'm actually curious to know your more detailed opinion on this. Like, I think it's pretty obvious how that can play into acute injury rates. What do you think that does for more of this long-term process and some of these guys that are getting to the league, guys and girls that are getting to the league?
Yeah, well, I'm barely qualified to talk about that from like the health perspective, but from what I've seen, like I deal with a lot of youth athletes as well. Like we kind of have a pyramid of athletes where you have a large base of youth athletes that leads into a smaller base of high school, smaller base of college, smaller base of pro. It's very rare we see an athlete that's early specialized and, insanely good and focused at that age that then climbs all the way to the professional ranks. Katarina's one of them, and she was one that was early specialized, never played another sport, went all the way to the top of her sport, obviously with some injuries that were probably because of that, but she was probably the only one that I've seen go all the way through. Everybody else was like basketball, football, track, or, the baseball player probably played another sport. Like, it's very rare. Now, you see it now with our baseball athletes, the ones that have, like, specialized so early. You're just like, dude, how are you put together like this? Like, you are so wound up in one direction, or you're so, you're so, like, asymmetrical because of the sport and how it's defined you. But in terms of the injury rate, it's tough to tell because what happens is it's attrition. By the time they get to the, I see them in college or pro, like the ones that specialize super early may not be there, So yeah, it's super interesting. But I think it all leads back to, go ahead. No, you got it. I think it all.
No, you
got it. You got it.
It real quick. It takes me back to the balance versus precision piece, right? If we're trying to improve performance, we have to be precise. If we're trying to improve health, we have to be more balanced. And when we're so disproportionate, especially during maturation years, that creates a pretty unsteady foundation. We don't have to know anything about anatomy or injury. If the same things are working all the time and we never deviate from that or do anything differently, eventually those structures are going to be overwhelmed and break down. It's very simple in that sense.
Yeah.
We'll circle this back around into the later parts of the conversation, but on the performance side, like I think it's a necessary evil. We should expose kids to training stimulus early on. We should expose them to sports. And I do firmly believe we should expose them to multiple sports. But case in point, it's nothing that we're saying here today at all is fear-mongering or is suggesting that we need to put athletes in bubble wrap. What our overarching message is, and again, we're going to work through this not just today, but over these next few, is we just have to understand better what these decisions are that we're making. And for parents, no differently than for agents at the professional level or coaches at the college level, understanding this totality of stress that these athletes are experiencing or going through, and understanding that we are the ones that are making the decisions that can alter or modify how these stress inputs are received. So some of it's going to be what it's going to be, but we can definitely do better than what we've seen from a lot of these organizations and others.
Now, if you look at getting a little bit more granular in this, if you look at the industry right now, you got a lot of people that are developing businesses around the performance industry. So technologies and softwares and things like that. So you have everything from hamstring testing to force plates to groin and hip testing to, it's just every month there's a new company that comes out that does some level of testing, and it all leads to a level of athlete profiling. And I think what's happened, this is just, I might be wrong, but I think what's happened is we've become obsessed with the profiling side of things. And when we look at most of the profiling, it's max outputs, and it's like all these like how fast, how strong, how high can you jump, how powerful you, like we're trying to answer those questions, and they're using that to kind of define what players, what their strengths and weaknesses are. And I think I have a major problem with that, especially looking at the NFL Combine. Like I think the easiest way to explain this, and this is a fact, the number one position that's correlated with faster 40-yard dash speed and success in the NFL is offensive line. Number one. It's wild. It's so wild. And there's actually a negative correlation between wide receivers and 40-yard dash speed. Like there's a point where you have to be fast enough, obviously. So it skews it a little bit. But the 4-3 guys, the 4-2 guys, it's really tough to play the game if they don't have the, breaking side of it, which we'll get into in a second. But it just goes to show, like, is the combine a predictor of success in the NFL? Well, no, it's not. And there's outliers and there's Myles Garrett and those types of guys, but it's not. So then you go back to the question of profiling, where we've become obsessed at every level. At the high school level now, I see all different types of things happening in terms of athlete profiling and benchmarking and percentile ranks and radar charts and all this stuff. And it's almost meaningless, right?
Well, what did we say the other night too, right? Like there's a deep origin to this, because strength and conditioning or human performance more collectively over the years has always been kind of little brother, right? Like we've kind of been the sidecar, underpaid, overworked. We all know the story, sad story. So I think when we started to see this influx of tech and we started to see this influx of measurability and objectivity, what we noticed is it gave the industry a leg to stand on, to demonstrate that they were doing what they were supposed to do, right? Like the strength and conditioning coach is measuring strength and conditioning and then taking it to the superior and saying, hey, look, we're doing our part, right? So on one hand, it's fantastic. But I think what you're getting at here is extremely important, because have we kind of lost the plot? Now are we just being completely siloed into what are the dashboards saying, what are the numbers saying, and now kind of losing the understanding of how does this actually transition someone from a performance standpoint, but also a health standpoint and a play standpoint. I think we're at a really interesting phase right now. The profiling stuff is fantastic, but if we don't understand this side of it, I think it really loses its validity quickly.
I mean, you told me the other day, the profile feeds the system. So if you go and you profile a bench press, a squat, a deadlift, a 40, and a vertical jump, and you're not good at those things, your system is going to start to create some level of let's get better at those things. We had a player this year who is an incredible football player that ran a 4.5 who dropped in the draft. And teams are like, we're not so sure about him. Well, this guy has the highest braking force and the highest rate of force development braking or decelerating we've ever seen. It's off the charts. Like his ability to brake is insane. He could run 20 miles per hour and brake in a box, like a small. Like he has an ability to play the receiver position from a completely different perspective, especially in the slot, like being able to break in and out. Well, if you tested that quality, you probably would have rose in the draft boards, But we're testing how fast are you in a straight line, which obviously, like, I'm biased because I'm a speed guy and I got my start in NFL Combine and I've been building in the combine space for a while. But it's so backwards to me to see those types of things. Now, obviously, on the other end, it's like we've helped our clients that maybe don't have the physical profile that NFL would want to see, and we've kind of like cheated the system and got them to express that for a day. but they pretty much go back to who they were after that once they start playing football.
Right,
And then
right.
it begs the question is like, is this having a negative impact on player health? Right? Like by spending 8 weeks on the NFL Combine and making you fast for the 40, did that have a negative impact on your health? I'm going to say yes, but what do you think? Yeah.
What do you
Yeah.
think? I was going to say, what do you think? Like, is it? It's like the most necessary evil in the entire sport, like, or in the entire sport process, at least for the NFL, because so much of their initial success is tied to how they
Right.
perform in Indianapolis. Millions of dollars. So, like, we got to squeeze that juice. But at what point does that start to come with a negative cost? And I think that's a really good proverbial question.
Yeah. I mean, there's good parts to it. There's
It's tricky.
like us being able to get a profile on them, understand how they run, understand the risks of how they run. Like, I think we've done a great job of profiling them from the standpoint of player health and performance. So we're looking at not only do we understand you from a performance level, but we understand some of the underlying causes to your performance and also the underlying risk to your health. And I think the value in combine training is really in that, where you have an opportunity where there's no football and there's a chance for you to really profile the player on the things that they would want to know about themselves going into the NFL. Everybody wants to have a 10-year career. Right?
Right. Yeah. And the combine is not conventionally preparing people for a 10-year career. It's preparing people for an incredible 4.5 seconds.
Yeah.
Right. But this all kind of speaks back to, I'll actually just give a quick direct shout out here. There's a great podcast episode from Dr. Marcus Elliott, who's the founder of P3, on Under the Number podcast. Really, really great episode that actually you put me on.
Amazing episode.
He's got a ton of nuggets in there, but the one I'll pull on here is, so for those of you who aren't familiar, P3 is an extensive biomechanical organization that has been doing a lot of force plate testing for NBA for a very long time. But anyhow, basically he goes on to say in this podcast, like, the best NBA players that they've ever tested, they've ever profiled, don't really do any one thing super great. In most cases, right? In most cases, they're not the fastest, they're not the highest jumpers, they're not the most powerful, but they really don't have a lot of weaknesses, and they are able to develop their skill off of what their physical strengths are. So I think the obvious example is Luka with this and his ability to decelerate, just like you're talking about our guy here, right? And so I think this should be eye-opening for strength and conditioning coaches, because we, again, historically have been misled into, well, if he's got knee problems or she's got ankle problems, we've got to get under the squat bar right away. We got to get stronger. We got to put more load on. We got to do more sprinting, whatever. Sometimes that is a solution, but not all the time. And not all athletes respond to stress the same way. And this is something that we've been, really diving into this year as well, is, some athletes respond differently to high volume phases versus high neural phases. Some athletes respond differently to decel versus propulsive forces. And, for the typical general strength and conditioning coach, I don't think this necessarily is saying, like, okay, well, if we have a team of 20 or 30 athletes that we see at a time, we're not saying, hey, you got to have an individual program for every person that you're working with in a group setting. But boy, there sure are some strategies. There are definitely some strategies. And it goes back to this initial point of understanding who and what we're working with initially, and then how to kind of put it into motion from that point.
Yeah, no, 100%. Because then it's like, I guess the question is, what's actually correlated with health and performance? So, like, what things do you actually have to do? Well, for me, obviously, I'm super biased in this, but I think profiling running, sprinting specifically, is probably the main thing that I would look at, main lens I would look at. And honestly, if you look at it, it's most sports demand running in the sport, and then 70% of the injuries that happen typically are from running based injuries and soft tissue based injuries.
Yep.
And if you look at
Yep.
any game, any field based game, about 30% of the actions on the field are in that high intensity component. So accelerating, decelerating, high speeds, all those types of things. So that's a lot. And then if you look at running and you look at how we profile it, we're just profiling an outcome. How fast are you running? Right. So it's and I'm guilty. Like we've done 275,000 tests on how fast people are across 9 to 40 years old. No, like not to brag on that. I'm saying that's a lot of tests, but it doesn't tell you anything about who they are and how they got to that speed and how healthy they are. It's the exact reason why force plates developed, where they're doing jump heights, jump height, jump height. Well, within that jump, there's a lot of components to that jump, and there's pieces within that jump that could tell you about
Right.
not only performance but the health of an athlete. And that's where the force plate boom came about. Is like, well, we can actually see the outcomes and the drivers and the strategy in this. And if you look at sprinting, it's the same thing, like outcome, how fast do you run? But now what we've started to do is look at some of those drivers to that. So like, we've done the Natera test and the force plate test and all those things, like all the pieces that everybody does, but it's within the context of seeing what are the drivers to that outcome that you got. And then from a strategy perspective, it's like, how did you technically get there? So how did you use the ground? How did you use the air? How did you use your phases? And then we back up into the health equation of, we know that if you're an outlier in these categories, that can lead to injuries down the line. So long way of saying, like, the P3 model is exactly what we're aiming for when it comes to developing athletes for the NFL and for Premier League and all those things, because I think what they've done really well is that they said, hey, this NBA Combine thing is a necessary evil. Like, we know that NBA needs to do some level of profiling to delineate good and bad players, like, or fitness, whatever. But during that time, we're going to take the opportunity to collect more information on you than anyone else has time to get, because we're not part of a team. So we could just sit here and collect and collect and collect for X amount of weeks. And then when you finish this block of time, we could package this profile up and say, from a health and risk performance perspective, this is where we think you'll be, and this is what you need to work on. Pass that to the team like a passport. And then now the team has clarity and transparency into maybe these are the things we need to focus on with this player. I think that's where the real value is in this profiling matrix.
I think that's by far the really well said there. I think that's really the key. And if I were to just kind of make a general statement in saying, like, okay, where is the priority being missed in most cases, I think it's that little segment right there. I think most people are doing and understand and appreciate the significance of a profile. I think we've gotten to a point where force plate testing is pretty commercialized. It's in most settings, GPS monitoring, etc. I think people are seeing individual deficits or physical limitations, for instance, within a force profile, and then probably accommodating for that in the training after, right? I think the missing piece is the continuum and the understanding of longevity, whether you're a 14-year-old soccer player or you're a 24-year-old NFL rookie, understanding that these are just a part of the puzzle for this battle of attrition that you're getting ready to enter. And this is where we come back around to this premise of preservation of health, or staying in the green. So for my end of this, right, the relativity of injuries, the number one predictor for all soft tissue injuries for any athlete is previous injury. Very clear. The second best indicator is how they execute movement and express forces, right? And this is where we've talked a little bit about the quadrant stuff. We've talked a little bit about force plate profiling, but we take somebody's individual injury history and we align it to this metric profile, and we look at those together and say, okay, based on where they've been and what they've had and what they are able to produce right now, these are some of the areas that we can say are clear deficits, or areas that we're going to flag yellow, orange, red. And then from that point, we come back and we sit back down. And this is where, me and you and Chris were on the calls on Sundays, and we're going through, okay, here are the numbers. Here's the plan for this week. Where do we need to adjust? And the point that I'm getting at is that it's a living, breathing thing. When you get to profiling, it's not something that just gets tucked away in a folder on your desktop, right? It's something that is living and breathing all the way through, because it's constantly changing. Nothing about an athlete's life is static. Everything is dynamic. So we take what we initially have, and then we continue to keep a finger on the pulse all the way through. And we are the ones that have to adjust to this. And I think this is a point that should resonate not just for coaches, right, or strength coaches, but sport coaches, physical therapists, parents, agents, managers, and so on, right? Because everyone is a part of this ecosystem. And I think that's an extremely important thing that gets missed.
And I know we're going to talk about, we're going to go at those people in a second, youth coach, agent, sport coach, and kind of speak directly to them. One last thing before we move off profiling. I think what's really important to understand, what you just said was beautiful. Like that's it. Like that's probably the most impactful thing said about profiling in my mind. Now, I think one thing to also add on top of that is that at one point there was a gap in this arms race of technology. So like you had to have significant amounts of money to collect data like this. Like if you wanted force plates 20 years ago, they were very expensive. They were very heavy, very big. If you wanted the level of information we're getting from 1080 and all these things, like there was like a gap. Only the top programs, the top teams in the world had the money to spend on those types of things. Well, what's happened now is that a lot of these technologies have been democratized and they're cheaper. So you could have an entire level of biomechanics suite like for pretty cheap. Things that would have cost you, an iPhone.
You need an iPhone.
These things cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars back in the day, millions of dollars back in the day. Now you see trainers in the park using, I got trainers in the park are using GPS. Trainers in the park are using force plates. Trainers in the park, and they have a high level of knowledge of it. I think the gap is not the actual technology, and it's not even the software. It's the connecting pieces between all of it. It's the system. It's what Stu's talked about, which we're going to get Stu on here to talk about the systems thinking and the component parts. But everybody has the component parts pretty much. Like if you're in Division I football, you probably have GPS, you probably have force plates, you probably have some level of sprint profiling. Now, I know not everyone has that, so don't like fire me up if that's not true. But you have some level of dose response understanding and profiling. And I think that the gap isn't getting those things anymore. That was the gap. I think the gap is now connecting the pieces. So everyone's doing force plates, but they may not be connecting that to health metrics. They might just be connecting it to performance metrics. Everyone's doing sprint profiling, but they're just connecting it to who's the fastest instead of how does this player project over 18 games this season based on the strategy that they have? Is there a risk, right? Like, for example, we talked extensively the other night just about like, the braking side of it. If you don't have that, what happens? And then we've talked about how the muscle functions on ground contact versus the tendon and aponeurosis. Like those are things that we don't consistently talk about in the industry. So it's not being pushed, onto people, and it's not something they're typically looking at in terms of profiling. Now, everyone's kind of doing the test already. I can tell you the test. If we were to work with a team right now, there isn't a new test that we would say, hey, there's a brand new test that we created. It's called the Danny and Les test, and it's the best test in the world. You probably already have the test. And how many times have we talked to teams where it's like, no, you actually already have the information. Just look here. No, actually, you've already looked there. Just connect that to this,
right.
And you start to tell it's storytelling. And that's the piece where AI can come in here tomorrow, wipe us all out from, a technology standpoint, but in terms of how we communicate, in terms of how we connect the pieces, that's a human. That takes a skill level, because the creativity side of things is really connecting pieces. That's what creativity is. It's connecting multiple pieces. So you're taking Alex and Tara's work, you're taking Chris Bishop's work, you're taking Stu's work, taking Dan's work, you're taking all of these people and you're connecting the dots. It's not about, and I think I talked to you about this other night, it's not about coming up with new stuff. It's not about being, hey, I just invented a new force plate metric.
Right.
Okay, cool. Like there's 200 of them already. Like I'm sure it's not going to tell us anything new. It's just a force and time trace, and same with sprinting. Everyone wants to come up with new words for things and it's sprinting's always been sprinting. And like we've gone from the spring mass model to understanding other pieces like vertical force, and then understanding the braking forces. As technology gets better, you start to uncover layers, but the basics are always the basics. It's the first principles conversation. And our industry is always like, man, to develop a new product, to be relevant in the industry, I have to be inventive. I have to come up with something that no one's ever done before. And it's not true. You just have to connect the pieces a little bit better, So
invention versus innovation. And at the end of the day, this is a human-based industry. And decision making in and of itself is not only an artistry, but a nuance.
1,000%.
And that requires a really deep understanding of multiple measures, multiple metrics, contextualizing it to the athlete, to the time of the year, and then being able to have, I think also too, especially in the team setting, a unification across all parties is another factor of this, right? And this is another thing that we've seen at the professional level is the siloed and chambered nature of multiple departments. So the programming inputs, very, very important. The medical or rehab inputs, very, very important. The infusion of those things, in my opinion, is the separating factor. Because if those parties aren't aligned on what these outcome goals are, what these steps to the outcome are, you can have every measure in the world. It's not going to be very much good.
And I know soccer's not perfect, but the tactical periodization model was built upon that thought process, is aligning the system. Like there's a tactical goal of how you want to play the game. And then there's technical skills that are involved in that, but there's also physical outputs involved in it. So aligning every drill to a tactical, technical, and physical outcome is massive. I mean, we did that for the Olympics, and everything was color-coded in terms of, the physical outputs that match the tactical goals. But if you're familiar with the tactical periodization model, that'll make sense. If you're not, it's really just like, imagine Danny's the head coach and says, I want to play a spread offense and I want to run and do all these things and no huddle and I want to go. Well, the strength coach should then take that information and say, okay, well, we need to be able to run. We got to have some level of repeatability or fitness. We need to be like, you could design your program off that. Now what happens in, I think, American sports is the strength coach operates independently of the head coach. And I'm not criticizing Division I college programs do a really good job. It's more like the high school youth level. And I see this a lot in soccer here in the United States, where you have the coach that wants to play a certain way. It's like, I want to have this outcome, and I want to play, into space and wide and all these things. But then the training looks completely different. It's like you're playing small-sided games, or the fitness looks completely different, right. Or they're not working on speed. So it's the aligning of all these people, but it's also a language thing as well, because like if you look at profiling from the levels of profiling the game, so like I'm profiling the sport, like let's say we're profiling soccer, we have to understand the dimensions of the field, how many players on the field, how long are the halves, boom. Okay, we get the basics of it, right? Then you profile the player. So this is how, the players are that are on this team. And then you can come up with, based on how the game is and based on how my players are, now I can develop my tactics. Or I develop my tactics and then develop my players. But the point is you have to consider all those factors. You can't train soccer players like tennis players. So you need to understand all of the, the metrics. And in the U.S., it's not as connected as we want, which leads into the next conversation about training load. And I think training load is something that is very misunderstood, and and I'm going to speak directly to like the players that misunderstand it, starting with the parents. The parents drastically misunderstand training load and what to do. So maybe you could. I know I've thrown my youth athletes at you over the past couple of months. Maybe you could speak to that for a second.
Well, let's tie 2 points together here, right? Like we started with there's been a rise in injury levels since 2000. Okay, so let's isolate this to the youth level. At the youth level, ACLs are up. Number I have is about 25%, so quite significantly. UCLs in youth baseball are
Mm,
astronomically increased. Zero
mm,
question on that one. Stress fractures, I don't have a statistic for, but I'm very curious to know more about this. Anecdotally, stress fractures at the youth level seem to be
mm.
very high, right? And locally, like in real life for us, I can tell you for sure that's the number one most common thing I've seen so far. And it just kind of, again, bringing it back around to the other side and to this point about the parents that we're tying into this ecosystem of sports science, right? Was it a
Mhm.
Fergus Conley quote?
Yeah, well,
Is that
Fergus
correct?
told me. I sat with him for a couple hours. Shout out Fergus Connolly. Um, I was sitting with him, and he was like, "Who's the actual sports scientist?" And I was like, "The sports scientist. Obviously, it's the person that holds the iPad and does the force plays." He's like, "No, it's the person that controls the schedule. That's the sports scientist."
Mm,
Yeah.
that's a powerful quote, man. Because the more I thought about that, the more that really is a tangible truth. And to answer what you were saying a second ago, right, with some of these youth athletes, like again, like we're not sitting here from our ivory tower and trying to say everybody's wrong and we have the answers to it all. But some of this is pretty common knowledge, or is relative common knowledge that needs to be understood a little bit more broadly. And I think about it like this, like with youth parents today, if we have two oppositions, we have the parent that is paying $150,000 a year to have specialty training and all these camps and skill development, and they're putting them in cryo and hyperbaric chambers and all these things. There's a lot of things that we can pick on with that. But if the opposition of that is an absent parent or a parent that just lets them sit around and play video games and eat Cheetos, you know, give me the parent who's investing $250,000 into their youth specialization athlete. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but bringing it into the context of this conversation, we have to get over this misconception that more is better. More is just more, right? And we have cases where these athletes are just being pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, and they really almost start to create a dependency on input to psychologically be comfortable with where the athlete is at. And what I mean by that is like truly afraid of taking a break, like fearful of taking a break. Because if they don't go to pitch camp, or if they don't, get their at bats this weekend, or if they don't go to the soccer camp, then all these other kids are going to start to pass them. And it's a really, really misunderstood thing that what we're doing at that point is not only just all the physical overload, right? But you kind of alluded to this earlier too. The psychological toll that takes on a 15-year-old can become extensive. It can eviscerate the love for the game, the purity of being a kid, and just being able to play sports and continue to grow. So the point to take away here, tying this back to the testing and the profiling and the training and all these things, is understanding that there is a dynamic that changes over time. the demands aren't the same at 14, 16, 18, and 25. And when we press on these certain buttons early on, usually it's just game and practice exposure, teaching speed, and introducing strength. We need to saturate those things in the beginning, but then we need to understand when those time points are to pull back and change what some of these inputs are. And this is where we get some balance to this push for precision. So I think that's kind of the starting point for, well, why are injury rates up so much? Well, one of them is early specialization is up. And with early specialization comes physical overload, overreaching. And we get we start to work at a reduced cost where we start to become more vulnerable as more injuries occur. The number one predictor of soft tissue injury is previous injury. So if you're 14 and you get a stress fracture in your foot, and then a couple months later you tear a hamstring, and then a couple months later you tear the opposite groin, well, yeah, an ACL or an Achilles or a serious injury is probably in the works. You know, the relationship between lower body soft tissue injuries and then, triggering a UCL. There's a lot of evidence on that as well. We can't move or we can't produce as much power from the legs. Where do we go? Well, we start cranking on the shoulder and the elbow. So instead of us just thinking that, okay, well, hey, we can just push through. Pain is a part of this. Soreness is a part of this. We have to stop treating it like an integrity competition and be a little bit more, mindful with this. And again, to your point, especially with our ability to have measurement and acuity and awareness of how athletes are responding to training.
Yeah, no, I agree. All that. It's wild because you think about it, in the scenario you're talking about, the parent is actually the sports scientist, right? So the parent is making the scheduling decisions on what to do next. So even like in the context, we've had this happen so many times where player A gets injured and all of a sudden the parent's like, I'm just going to search quickly on Instagram and find somebody that looks like a PT. And then that PT just has them stretch and ice for 2 months. And they're like, everything's better. I don't feel any pain anymore. And they jump back into training and something else happens. And the PT's happy because he's like, I got business coming all the time. Like I never run out of clients. He just recycles them. And part of the problem in this is like youth sports is now, there's private equity in youth sports. So there's people that see the potential to make money on athletes right now, especially youth athletes, because they just buy up all their time. Like right now, there's more tournaments than ever. The tournaments make a ton of money. I see it. I see it all the time. Yep. As people are doing this full time now, like people in our space are doing it full time, but also on the sports side. So like a basketball coach is running camps every other weekend, skill sessions every day. But that's how they make money. So they need to have clients. So they're always pulling at the kids. And they've developed relationships that are strong enough to say, hey, you need to come in 3 times a week. And then the next guy is also saying, hey, well, you got to lift 3 times a week. And then the next guy is saying, hey, you need to do speed 3 times a week. And all of a sudden, it's a super congested calendar, and nobody talks to each other. And the parent is the one that has all the information, right. And the parent feels driven from the athlete's like desire to play. Like if your athlete's like, hey, I want to play Division I sports, well, now there's a little bit more of a pathway to get there. When I was growing up, either you were like my brother who's 6'7" and could dunk a basketball from the foul line, or you were me that had very little athletic talent comparatively, and I was the one that was told you better get really good grades, and you better work really hard, and you play JV, and you go play defense really hard when you get on varsity, but you're never getting a trainer. Well, it's the opposite now. Every kid has a trainer and multiple trainers. I was just watching this one kid that I train, and he posts every training session. Let me step back. The trainers post and they repost. So this kid is reposting, and I'm like counting. I just wrote down how many things he did. He played a football game on Friday. On Saturday morning, he was doing skill sessions. By Sunday, he was doing some specialized recovery that turned into an actual lifting session. By Monday morning, he was doing another lifting session with another guy. And it's like, that was your recovery window you just went through. Like that was the time that you
Yeah.
were supposed to
Yeah.
recover, and you spent probably 500 bucks or so doing all these things. So you funded all these guys out there. But that's the problem right now is the parents don't have context. The parents don't know because, like, if I was a parent right now of a 14-year-old, I have a 4-year-old, so I'm nowhere near there. But if I was a parent of a 14-year-old and I didn't study and spend time in this industry, I wouldn't know either. I would just say, hey, I didn't have this opportunity, so I want to give my kid this opportunity. And it's well intentioned. And you
Right.
see these parents like fumbling around, like literally as taxi drivers driving up and down the highway to all these different people that say they do different things. I had a parent tell me that they want to do speed with me and agility with another guy and strength with another guy. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to train your athlete. Like, and he was offended, but I'm like, it's not helping you. Like, find one of those guys can do all three, and if they can't, they shouldn't be in this industry. So the parent, as a sports scientist,
Yeah.
like going back to that, they control the schedule, they control the food inputs, they control who their athlete sees and their training load. And then on top of that, the next level is like the team sport coach is just like more and more and more demanding now. If you play soccer and you don't play 11 months out the year, you're probably not making the ECNL team, which is the top team, or the MLS Next team. So it's complex, man. It's super complex. This is a really, really, really saturated, almost manipulative space right now. You know?
It's tricky, man. It is. It's tricky, and a part of the reason why, one, we're talking about it now, but two, we have prefaced that this is going to be something we're going to pull on for a couple of these sessions. But I think the important, like, let's to bring that to a summary point. If there are parents listening to this, if there are people that are listening to this with kids, right, and a straightforward answer here. What do we do, right? The best thing that we can do is have consistency with who is overseeing the training, who is overseeing or doing the restoration or recovery work. And at some point throughout the calendar year, get away from it. Like, just completely get away from it for a month, right? Take a month over the summer if they're in soccer for the entire year, if they're in baseball for the entire year. I genuinely mean the best thing that they can do is go be a 15-year-old for a couple weeks, couple months, or for a month or so, and just get away from the sport for a little bit. I would take that one step further in saying, don't specialize early. I do firmly believe that, right? The rule in my household, when she gets to that point, is you can do whatever you want. You can't specialize before 14 or 15. And you can only specialize if you're really, really good. Like, if we really think you got a chance in this, we'll go ahead and take that leap. But until then, 99% of high school athletes are not going to play at the professional level. 95 of them aren't even going to play at a high level university. So let's just play some ball and have some fun. Be healthy, be in good shape, strong, confident, get good grades, and have your life thereafter. But this ties into a bigger point, or a continued point, that is the agents at the professional level, and how it kind of works in a similar fashion, right?
Man. Yeah, I
So
mean,
what do we do
honestly,
there?
the agent in this case would be the sports scientist because they're dictating what their client, what their athlete's doing. And it's interesting because agents will invest the money, invest the time, invest the energy into draft positioning, which is the NFL Combine. So I'll explain it for the people that haven't seen this yet. But when the athlete finishes their college career, the agent will basically front the money to pay for an athlete to go to a training facility. We're one of them. Exos is one. Bommarito, XPE, all these spaces around the country. Typically California, Texas, Florida, in that range. So they'll spend the money for their house, for a rental car, for training, for PT, and they invest. I mean, it's getting to the 100,000s plus now sometimes, and it's all about getting faster. It's all about getting better combine. And like during that time period, you hear from the agent every single week. Actually, no, let me step back. Probably 3 times a week sometimes. You're hearing from them
Yeah.
consistently. How's the client doing? Are they on track? Are they going to hit this 40? Boom. Then they go run their 40, they kill it. And then what? Nothing. We don't hear a single thing. Now, to give you context and why that's important, is they finish the combine. And after the combine, they go to pro day. So typically there's a gap. Now, for our guys, typically they do well enough at combine that they don't have to do a pro day. Sometimes they do. So there's 2 peaks in that. After pro day, you kind of just sit around and wait. And you wait until the draft. Now, this is what happens. The agent isn't calling. The athletes are like, well, nobody told me to do anything. So they go home and they kick it. Or they go back to their homie that was training them, back in the day, and they're just doing whatever. Just doing what,
They
and
do
there's
whatever.
no
Yeah,
attention,
yeah.
there's no focus on that. Well, what comes after the draft? Rookie OTAs. Rookie OTAs is about 80% of training camp in terms of volume and intensity. It's like it's hard. It's football. And they go straight into that 2 or 3 days. Boom. Then they go straight into OTAs, straight into mini camp. Right? Okay, so a lot of times athletes, they have some residual from the season before and then combine training, and they're okay. Now let's get into the serious part. So they finish minicamp in June. They have 6 weeks. Well, if you're a college athlete, and if you think about this objectively, they haven't had a break. They went straight from the previous year, winter training, spring training, summer training, fall camp, season, combine training, and then combine, pro day, short break, rookie minicamp, and then a break. So what's the natural thing to do? I'm going to take a break. And they're not getting advised. And I shouldn't say that. Most agencies will advise, but in terms of the attention level that's being spent on that time period is not the same as combine. It's not as intensive. It's not as make sure you do this and I got to invest in
Right.
this and got to invest in
Yeah.
that. So what happens? Guys chill. Like we look at guys that should be playing as rookies, but they can't because they're hurt. Because they go through that summer period, take their time, or they kind of do whatever they do. Some guys just run routes, some guys just throw the ball, some guys just do DB work, some guys just lift. But there's a lack of attention to it. And they don't want to like have some serious like intensive program because that's all they've been doing for the past year. Then they go into training camp and they're like, boom, hit right in the face with the volume and the frequency of training. And you now have 6-7 hour days and it's very structured and it's like this shock to their system. And a lot of guys don't make it out of training camp healthy as rookies, which affects their second contract timing. Like if you don't play that first year, it definitely affects when you can, have access to money on the back end. So long story short, the agent is in control of some of the aspects of this, and they are technically the sports scientists in this place because we are hired as performance people, and we can try to advise and all that, but ultimately the person that controls the money and the attention and the resources becomes a sports scientist. And yeah, so what do you see in that space? Like how? Yeah,
I got a couple of things on that. Like I think so. The first point, like with the agent piece, what you're getting at here is like have the same level of emotional investment after your payday has come. You're emotionally invested and on the ball, and you got your finger on the pulse in January and February because we know, the better they perform at the combine, the bigger the payout is going to be in the short term. But what we're saying is, hey, everyone involved, let's see the longevity of this. We all know that, especially in the NFL, the real money is in contract too. So moving someone from, mid third to early second round is huge. That's enormous. It's a big thing. Make no mistake about it. But whether you're top 5 or you're mid 5th round, everyone basically has the same opportunity to that second contract, right? And I think about
yeah,
a dude like Max Crosby, right? Late 4th round out of Eastern Michigan, worked his way up, got to his second contract. Now he's on his third, right? So the point is that in the NFL especially, it's a long game. So we have to think about it from that sense, and from the sports scientist, the agent, like your passion, your emotional investment needs to be persistent beyond that initial, first point of combine finishing. The second thing that comes to mind when you're describing this first year for these rookies, for these NFL guys, the one factor that really sticks out is, we talked about a second ago how the number one predictor of soft tissue injury is previous injury. Well, a close second is rapid and unpredicted changes in workload. So, in other words, and this ties into the youth points we were making a second ago as well, but going from doing everything to doing nothing to jumping back to doing everything. Big danger zone. Big risk there. The way we want to think about this is minimizing the peaks and valleys. So we're going to go up, we're going to come down all the time throughout the entire year. But instead of having massive spikes and massive drops, how can we bevy that out a little bit? The other thing for the rookies, how about the psychological stress and toll that process takes? I mean, I've heard some stories, but I didn't know you when you were 22. I certainly remember when I was 22. You dump a couple $1 million in my bank account. You set me up in Miami or in LA. You know what I'm saying? So it's a really radical time. And for a lot of these dudes, you're going from a place like, Louisiana or Seattle or Oregon, and then now all of a sudden you're moving across the country, and maybe you're going to be, a lock for the roster, but maybe you're not. Maybe you bounce around a couple of times even in that first year. The demands are different. The expectation is different. You go from being the superstar of the team to just being one of 53. So all of these things begin to compound, and it creates this exponential effect of, how the body is going to respond to stressors and to demands. So from this lens of sports science, and what, the point that we're kind of creating here is we have to understand that there is no finish line with this. Like I think we set out these goals, we set out these dates, and from the agent to the coach, to the parent, to us, to the sport coach, we all see start and stop points throughout the year for ourselves. And I think the real goal of this is having true integration that uplifts all of the components or the surrounding parts that are continuous throughout the year. And just sometimes you're a little bit more involved or a little less involved throughout those points, but everyone throughout the entire process needs to be active on.
Yeah, and honestly, like these are really good points. Like the first point you're saying is like have the same level of emotional investment after the payout. I would argue, knowing the agents, and most of the agents we deal with are really good people, like, and really good agents as well. Like I've had, like, getting into the industry, I heard a lot of agent stories, and obviously I've had my experiences with certain agents, but I would say currently who we're working with, it's been an amazing experience. Like, these dudes they listen. They, like, even when you tell them the truth, they're like, okay, cool, like, let's do it. I think some of it is actually on us. And it's actually, I would say it's on us as an industry, because of how heavily we promote combine. And, like, we make it bigger than what it is. It's our Olympics, and it's fun because it's like you're recruiting, and then you're in this space. It's like warfare, and then you get to the combine. It's like everyone's mean mugging each other in the hallway. It is what it is, but, like, that's our ego boost, right? Because it's an outcome, and then we kind of like fall off, and it's like, it is what it is. I think it's our fault as an industry that we're not pushing on the agents more to understand what it is. And that leads back to the P3 model, is that they took the combine and they turned that combine into an opportunity to collect more data to then further their development. And I think right now what we need to do as practitioners is say, we have 8 weeks where there's no football, and we can collect all this information. Let's collect the right stuff. Let's build the profile that's built heavily on health and performance in a balanced state. And then let's let that drive the next 12 months, because it needs to. Like, January to January, this should be the plan. And in that, we need to outline, number one, you have combine, and then right after that, you have workouts for teams. That then leads into rookie OTAs, and then leads into OTAs and then minicamp. Guys don't know that, right? And then you have a 6-week break, and then you go into training camp. And as a rookie, your training camp looks different than our veterans. You know what I mean? Like, training camp is not the same for everybody, you know? And what we need to do is further outline that for them, right?
Our first episode that we talked, right? One of the things we covered was, what went wrong in the combine? What did we do wrong, or where did we miss, right? And my list was significantly longer than yours or anyone else's for that matter. But bro, this was one of the first points. This was one of the first things that was just a real wake up call to me, right? I remember I just moved into the new crib, boxes and stuff everywhere. I'm like, oh God, I made it. We did it. We got through this thing. And we had one of our athletes who had a pro day March 21st. It was real late. And you hit me up and you're like, yo, hey, what's the status with him? Like, where's he at? I'm like, what do you mean? I haven't heard from him over a week. Like, he's got 10 days. I'm like, And so you made me think of it because, like, it is an emotional process and it is this big investment. And I think the cool thing about the combine is it's a microcosm of everything we're doing throughout the rest of the year. It's all the same, right? It's more magnified during that time. So the takeaway point here is I took my foot off the gas because I saw a proverbial endpoint. But when we're talking about this presence of staying in the green and the continuation of health and the continuation of programming and planning and integration, it is a 24/7, 365 thing. And we have to take pride in that, because let's bring two ends together on this too. Like, one of the things we started with here was human performance conflating their level of contribution to this thing because we've been minimized for so long. Right? So we've kind of looked at it like that. Well, the same group of people, speaking at large here, right? And this doesn't apply to us specifically, but speaking at large, the same group of people that beat their chest and beat the drum about being underpaid and being overworked and not having enough of an input are the same ones that are afraid to work weekends and are the same ones that can't take a call after 6 p.m. And they're the same ones that can't get up early to go meet people for sessions. You can't have it both ways. So it is on us exclusively. And if we want the credit, we have to accept the consequence. So in this context, it's like, maybe we do need to get beyond just, filling in our programming sheet and checking our force plate metrics and then shutting the laptop. The communication piece is so essential to this within the team, direct with the athlete, and then to the extraneous parties, parents and agents.
I think the most successful model of this was when we did Ayuk, or right after the combine. I had a chance to meet Dustin Perry with the 49ers, who's incredible. Like, he's been mentor to me and helped me a ton. And he was like, I remember I was talking to him. He's like, oh, you're working with Ayuk? I was like, yeah. He's like, all right, here's what I need from him to be ready for training camp. And he sent me like all of these things, like volumes here, this much high speed. And I was just kind of getting used to GPS. I think this is 2021. I'm just now getting used to, or maybe in 2020, but I'm just getting used to GPS. And I'm just getting used to training this stuff. And I was like, cool, I'll just follow it. And I followed it, and he went to training camp. And when he went to training camp, I looked at what we did, and I was like, it wasn't really like just speed training. It wasn't really strength training. It was like we needed to get to a general volume of work to be able to handle more work. And it was like it was a GPP looking back at it. And then every year after that, we did the same thing. What do you need from him in training camp? How is he going to play for the next year? And then boom. No, I think my problem is that not every guy had the level of focus that Brandon had. in terms of wanting to do all the mundane, boring things. I think when you look at the industry, there's a lot of sexy things out there that are a lot sexier than what me and Brandon did. Like what we did with Brandon was objectively boring. It was the same thing over and over and over and over again every day in and day out. And it was just like mundane. Like it didn't change much, you know? And I look at the attention span of the athletes sometimes and like I'm gonna put some blame on them too. Like everybody's in this, so we might as well put some blame on them. Is they wanna go to the place that is attached to the scene and the parties and the friends and you know the hangouts. Like I had a guy, I'm not going to name names, but he wanted to go to Miami so he could be with his homie and so they could drink and be on yachts and all that. San Diego's not that fun. California's, I mean, I shouldn't say that. It is fun if you're into like regular stuff.
It's not
You're not
Miami.
going to go meet a bunch of young girls and stuff. There's not a big drinking scene here anymore. It's actually interesting. The drinking scene has died here in some ways, which is cool. But it's not the place you go to have intense amounts of fun. I look back at the LA scene for a while. The LA scene was wild. And I look at all the ACLs that popped out of that scene as well. You know what I mean? Because they were doing some wild stuff. But it's not sexy. And I think guys are attracted to the sexiness. And it makes it really difficult in our space to try to tell guys like, yo, like, I know you just got a paycheck. I know you just got free of this, you know, like, I don't know, this senior year where it's super stressful and it's really difficult and the combine stuff and you finally got some bread and you finally got an opportunity to chill and you want to go to the place that's attached to the beach and even run on the beach and all that stuff. It's hard. And I don't know if we'll ever be the guys to push it down guys like, you got to do this, but I'm gonna say it on here, you know.
Yeah. Well, there's a fault in perspective on that, right? And the fault in perspective is seeing the start as the end point. Getting to the league is not the celebration. That's not the end point. Like you got there, which is incredible. You're getting to the NFL alone. We all know is a statistical improbability. Very, very difficult, right? But you got there. And so you have to have the maturity and the sense of awareness of understanding like, okay, it's a clean slate again. I'm bottom man on the roster again. I got to fight for everything again. I've got to prove to everyone what I'm capable of again. It's not the time to sit back and say, hey, I got a couple 100,000 of expendable income now. So now I'm going to go, you know, down to TJ or out to Miami or whatever, right? Like it's, we've seen great examples of this. We've seen negative examples of this. We all know the horror stories. But the point that we're getting at here is that for the vast majority of athletes, as at the pro level in this case, right, you know, you're responsible for the direction of your ship. You're responsible for who's on that ship. You're responsible for the ultimate endpoint that you reach, right? You're a full-grown adult. So having the ability to understand this side of things, the physical preparation, the recovery, you know, working with the team, working outside of the team, finding different resources. These are all things that fall onto your responsibility. So what we're trying to produce and provide is a medium of not just the training, but the education and the literacy behind it. And like, you know, again, to kind of pull on one, I know what you were getting at there a second ago with some of this, you know, the buffoonery that we see in the training world. How can we help you understand the differences between some of this eyewash and these things that are, you know, much more grassroots and real? And as the athlete, your body is your most valuable asset. You don't have that body, you don't have those physical traits or those attributes, and you are immediately affecting your potential earnings or your potential work. So you got to be educated to a degree.
Which leads to the last part, which is the training. And like, if you look at the training right now and tie it back to the beginning part, we're talking about the profile, is the profile feeds the system. So you go to most training, not most, I shouldn't say most, but you go to these training facilities sometimes and they're driving, hey, we're going to squat test you or deadlift test you or jump height you or sprint you, whatever, which drives the system, which then guys are trying to chase these outputs for the whole off season. And we know from a tendon perspective, we understand from a training load perspective is that like a focus on pure outputs isn't necessarily going to make you the most camp ready. And I think most of the good facilities believe this, but I'm speaking more generally, especially in the youth space as well. Um, it doesn't help you prepare, and that's the piece that I think is probably the tie up to all this. And one thing that I'll add in on that as well is that our job as performance coaches is relatively new. And then if you think about the relative newness,
Mm-hmm.
that the industry was born out of an off-season period. So it was built out of there's a clear off-season that you develop these qualities, and then you go to the season and then you just stop and then you just play the sport. Well, that's how our industry was developed originally as an off-season thing. And now that seasons have been extended, so they actually added more NFL games, right? They're adding seasons, they're adding games, they're adding time. Especially in the youth space, there is no off season, so everything is technically in season, right? There is no more off season. So your model of chasing these outputs in the off season and then transitioning to season is actually dead. Like you have to be able to prepare people
Yep.
to play at any time. They have to be continuously ready, which is the staying in the green idea, where you have to monitor your dose and response. You have to monitor your training load, but you also have to monitor your training response, which should also lead to how you do interventions and programming, which should also be driven from your profile, right? And it's this complex. It's a lot harder, but you have to be able to be adaptable. So the species that is the most adaptable is the species that survives. The species that can't adapt to climate and those things die off and go extinct. It's the same thing for business. It's the same thing for us as practitioners. We have to be adaptable. So you have to adapt to the different variables that are changing, which could be weather, it could be, I don't know, maybe you can't get inside and you have to only be outside, or there's things that are going to change up whatever program you set, or it could be training load, like we're high right now, which means we need to do something else, or we're low, which means we need to stimulate. Like there's very clear things that are going to cause your program to not be what you wrote out on a piece of paper. You can't write out 16-week programs anymore in some Russian system that you're going to follow every progression up to. No, it doesn't exist. And as organisms, we adapt to stress differently. If I'm a smoker and you're not, and we go on a run, I'm not a smoker. I mean, I smoke cigars, clearly, but if we go on a run and I've been smoking every day, the way I adapt to the stress of running is going to be significantly different than you, right? So the way that I need to now take care of myself, obviously stop smoking, but I'm going to respond differently than you. And that's the piece that I think from a training perspective is that the industry is still focused on sets, reps, progressions, and it hasn't shifted.
Hang clean for
Exactly. And it hasn't shifted to how do we be adaptable, right? 100%.
it's the most important thing that we've said on this episode for sure, if not this whole thing. It's one of the most important things that you brought up. The change in the fundamental role. And it's funny because like I've looked at this for a while, right? And the term, the little heuristic that I've always kind of come to with this is like the best ability is to improve the ability to tolerate variability. Improving the ability to tolerate variability speaks to the physical and the physiological variability. But what you're speaking to is actually more important. It's the broader sense of what a strength and conditioning coach's roles and responsibilities looked like in 1990 versus 2005 versus 2025. Those are three objectively and distinctly different roles and responsibilities. And it, again, like you mentioned, like, yeah, sure, it's a little bit more nuanced. It's a little bit more complex, but it's also the reality, right? And there has to be a perspective or a paradigm shift that comes with this. And maybe this is where you and I are just very fortunate to be as tight with Stu as we are, because I think this is the point that he illustrates better than anybody. It's not about optimizing the component. It's about the infusion of the multitude of component parts that are all coming together and creating this collective outcome. And so, from the strength and conditioning or human performance role, what we've been trapped in is exactly what he, really like faults most frequently, in that we are trying to just optimize a 10 out of 10 for strength and conditioning with no regard for how this actually interfaces with the surrounding parts and
1,000%.
components. So I think it's an enormously important thing, and like you mentioned, right, the adaptability and the fluency of this, understanding how to not just create and conduct a profiling process, but understanding the dynamic element of that thereafter, the continuation of it, and then how this actually prompts what's needed for these athletes is the
Yeah, a thousand
separating factor
percent.
right
Like
now.
2011 NFL lockout. There was no OTAs. There was
Yep.
no spring football. There was none of that. And players got strong. I mean, you look at the videos from that time period. Dudes were doing all types of training, all types of like weightlifting and things. What happened when they came back to football?
The highest rate of injury since
And
2000.
specifically, what types of injuries?
A lot of soft tissue, almost all lower body. It was, it was kind of like the first real spike in this injury trend line that has been linearly increasing, again, really since 2000. But you see 2011, 2012, and it's a clear elevation
Yeah,
in rate and incidence. And so, this again feeds back to some of the running themes of this, but getting strong is very important to be a good athlete, right? But strong enough is strong enough, and strength does not account for the velocity and dynamics of sport. So what we do in the weight room matters, but only as much as it transfers into what we're
yeah, a
doing
thousand
thereafter.
percent. And even just getting specific, like there's tons of tendon injuries during that year. There's ligament injuries. There's like serious injuries, like soft tissue as well. And it just shows that the accounting for the training didn't account for like the actual sport. So the profile of the sport is that they have to play 40 to 60 plays depending on who you are, and those repeat every so often over the course of 3 hours, right? That's the game, right? And also you're preparing for the training, which is training camp, and which is the most difficult part. Well, the actual training that guys didn't prepare them for the thing that they were going to see. So although it was good, they got stronger, and you check the box, and it's valuable from the standpoint is the strength aspect was changed when they got into the high speed, change of directions, high volume situation, almost like worst case scenario. Training camp is worst case scenario. It's high volume, it's high speed, it's high change of direction and reaction. It's all the things that you don't want to do a lot of, but you have to because you got to prepare for the season. Well, you weren't prepared for that, and especially from a tendon perspective, if you're just doing the heavy lifting side of things and you're not developing the tendons, which is a whole other. I know we'll get into the tendon conversation later on, but it didn't. Although it was good from the sense of guys looked like monsters, but it didn't prepare them for football, and it's the exact reason why you can't just pull a power lifter off the street and say, "Hey, throw some pads on. You should be a good player because you're fast and you're strong." And while that's true, there's still a sport demand, and there's still a volume demand within that sport, and an intensity demand within that sport that's very specific per position. So yeah, I think it's now that the current problem is the CBA in NFL and in NBA has actually pushed guys into less training periods. So the CBA is actually demanding that the guys have more breaks within their season. So it's harder and harder and harder to keep guys in the building to protect them and do the training and do all of that. Like they're now being sent to different locations that all do different things that may not be looking at the demands of the game that each player needs to focus on. And the hard part about that is that although the private industry is very beneficial for some guys, there's a wide variance in what guys do in the off season. There's wide variance in what guys do from a training perspective. So you take any team, let's say the Chicago Bulls, and you give them an off season, and they all go to different spots. They're all going to do very different things to prepare for the season. And the main issue is that no one communicated with whoever's the head of the Chicago Bulls of like, hey, what actually does this guy need? And then from a training perspective, what is this guy going to be required to do when he gets back? And what did he just do before he got here? That doesn't happen consistently. So the less time that they're spending with their teams, the more time they're spending with guys like us. And I'll tell you, if you saw me 7 years ago and you sent a guy for me for training, I would have just provided value in the way that I thought I was providing value. So I would have made the guy run 23 miles per hour. And I thought that would have been the reason why he's an all-pro. Well, a lot of those guys that I had ended up breaking during the season until we figured out, like, man, it's almost more important to prepare them for the sport that they're about to go to, but also take into context what they just came from. It's more important for me just to be a bridge than it is for me to be some hero. And I think there's a lot of like heroism in our space that we have to have the guy leave with a 45-inch vertical or else I'm not that valuable. Because you see the post, it's like, I got this guy to a 42-inch vertical, and then 2 posts later you see Achilles rupture. It's like, okay, you did get him to a 45-inch vertical, but now the dude can't walk for a year, you know? So how valuable is that thing? It's not as valuable as being healthy, I'll tell you that. And that was a hard lesson I had to learn, you know?
There's so much there. But I guess to kind of bring it to a summary here, because I got to get to massage lady school here soon.
By the way, Danny is a
But
massage lady now. Just want to throw that out there. Go ahead. Yeah.
the the points that we're continuing to come back to, are all related. We need precision. We need to train hard. We have to push those thresholds. We have to have high volume exposures. We have to have high velocity exposures. We have to understand that the work that we do matters. Truly, it matters, and we have had a transformational improvement in our ability to progress physical attributes and the way that athletes are able to express power and force. We also, at the same time, have to not lose the plot and understand this bigger picture of pro athlete, high school athlete, youth athlete. We're one piece of many. The infusion or the integration of these pieces will always be more significant than maximizing or optimizing the one we have ownership over. So the communication, the transparency, the continuity of language and outcome goals, all of these things matter. And the final piece is when we need to emphasize the health component or the longevity component, we have to balance the system. We have to balance the tendinous and contractile tissues. We have to balance the bioenergetics or the energy systems. We have to balance the psychological stressors and the emotional stressors of work and of life, right? And as we continue to see this transition or evolution from strength and conditioning coach to human performance coach, it does come with an expanded role, but it also comes with an increased opportunity for work. And I think on the private sector side, that's an extremely important thing to understand. It changed my life. I'm sure it changed your life as well. to recognize that if I can be more versatile in what I can provide, I'm not as limited in my opportunity for income or work. And then within the
100%.
organization side, it's a similar effect, right? You know, so
100%.
having that versatility, the bandwidth of growth, and then being able to be measured and precise or calculated with when we provide what is what it ultimately boils down to.
Love it. Yeah. We'll end with one thing. I think the main piece of this is that there's shared blame between us as practitioners, sport coaches, agents, parents, um, and the athletes. Like, we're all at blame. But the goal of this is to provide a little bit of context, but also solution. And over the next 4 to 5 podcasts, as we dive into like specifics here and we drill down into these components and hear from some people that are deep into this space, we'll provide a little bit more clarity on what the actual outcome is that we're trying to achieve. So appreciate you guys listening. This was, dang, I didn't even realize it was an hour and 25 minutes. We just been talking. And honestly, like,
Well, it's a beautiful conversation.
yeah,
Yeah,
we've been doing this a lot recently, which is cool. And it's funny because you leave this podcast and it just extends into your day, and then we end up texting about it, and we get back to the next podcast, and it's like you dump like 1% of what you talked about in the whole thing. So there's a lot coming here, but I appreciate everybody. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure it's not just like once in a while, like subscribe and then have the alert on there. So when our new podcast drops, you guys get it, and then make sure to share and repost it, because that's how this industry grows. Like you probably spend 30, 40 hours preparing for things like this. And then, this isn't like a business model for us. We don't get paid to do it. Like, so this is something that we are trying to provide, just 100% free to everybody, but we wanted to make it as valuable as possible. But the most important thing that anybody could do as a listener is just share and repost it. So yeah, that's it. Appreciate you guys.
100%.
Yeah. Peace.